Welcome to Stories from the Center of the Universe, the podcast about the human experience.
Cherud Wilkerson, welcome to the Center of the Universe.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I should mention that you connected to the podcast through Kevin Flippin, who is known as the occasional co-host. It's been a while for Kevin, Cherud. I'll tell you, I almost changed his title to he co-hosted twice.
Oh, whatever. I'm still occasional. Especially when someone like Cherud comes on.
Right on. So, Cherud, where'd you grow up?
So I grew up in Long Island. I'm a New York guy. Long Island, New York. You can hear it in my Long Island and in my New York. I grew up. So I grew up in a place they call Dix Hills. It's a town in the middle of the island, but in Suffolk County. So one interesting fact is, I was born in 1962, and I was born up north. So I think it was a little different down here in the South than it was in the North. So, and I say that because my next sentence, when I went to elementary school, I was the only black guy in my elementary school.
So, look, I'm from the South. I was born in the late 60s. I don't have memories of segregated education, but I can tell you Virginia public schools were segregated back when you were born, for sure. And it sounds like, I mean, you tell me, why were you the only black kid in your elementary school?
Because Long Island, what people don't know about Long Island is Long Island was, and still to a degree, is a very segregated island. There are places on Long Island where black and white live together harmoniously, but there were places where, for a variety of reasons, back then, it was primarily due to economics. This was a very affluent neighborhood, a very affluent school district. So many couldn't afford to live there at all. My father worked in a hospital. He was an X-ray technician, and from him, he wanted us to have like the best of education. He was probably the only black X-ray technician at his hospital in Queens. He was an Air Force guy. So for him, it was about exposing us to the very best that he could afford. And Dix Hills was, one of those areas where, we could integrate. There really wasn't, I didn't run into any, what I would call general racial issues. I mean, occasionally you're always going to find one, but it was a mix. But those were my early years. And I still have some of those friends, pretty much all of them, actually. We still, laugh and talk about, because they hadn't really seen another black guy, it's 1970, 67, 68. Yeah. So, I remember my first girlfriend. I remember her bringing me home to play. And I didn't realize the impact until, maybe a couple of years later, when Sidney Poitier's movie came out, Guess Who's Coming Home for Dinner? And and it was so funny. But we had a group of us that we called the United Nations. Because we had one Cuban, we had one black, we had an Italian, we had an Asian, and we had an Irish cat. And it was a group of us. And so we would all kind of look out for each other. But they would always look out kind of for me because it was interesting. The Cuban guy, he was real cool. He had a heavy accent, but so that was my early years, and then I'd say about 7th or 8th grade we moved, and I moved into a more segregated community at the town of Bay Shore. I don't know if you're familiar with Fire Island.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But that's where I moved to Bay Shore. So my summers were spent on Fire Island. That's just what we did. But I found it very interesting because when I moved to Bay Shore, now I had, been to Bay Shore many times because my grandmother lived in Bay Shore and my mother and my church and everybody was in Bay Shore. And I had friends that were in Bay Shore. But it was just very different coming, from an all-white school to coming to a mixed school where it seemed to me we had more issues there than I had in my all-white school. Everybody was integrated, but they were still segregated. And we used to laugh because that was really due to us, being like-minded individuals. Like I ate with the football team. Football team didn't matter. But, we had, a white cafeteria and a black cafeteria. But that wasn't the school's doing. I guess you just ate with who you were comfortable with. Right. And, as we look back at it, we're 50 years out of school. And when we all get back together for our reunions, we talk about how great our childhood was. And the fact that it was just such a melting pot. And then some of the things, when you hear, what we're talking about today in society that we would have gotten crucified for back in the day.
Times are different for sure.
But we just didn't think that way. I mean, it's just who we were. We fought in the morning, we were friends in the evening, and it was what it was. Now I'm sure there were certain areas like on Long Island, like Bensonhurst. I didn't go to Bensonhurst. That's just what it was. But all of these, my young life kind of shaped me. I went to where I played football in high school. I also wrestled in high school. I studied martial arts for about 15 years. I started studying martial arts at about 7th or 8th grade. No, actually it was before that. I had to have been in 6th grade. Yeah, because my mother was very passive and my father, he wasn't very passive and my grandmother wasn't. And I think I came home one day. It was even before that. And I had let somebody kind of beat me up. And my grandmother said that I better not come home beat up again. And my father put me in martial arts. And I can tell you from that point on, I never got beat up again. They call it modern day MMA. It was just something that I did back then. I didn't get paid for it. So, I mean,
you had a good grandmother.
Yeah. So, and then from there, I switched schools to another school. My mother had moved to another town, and I ended up playing a year of football there, and then coming back to my original town in Bay Shore to live with my grandmother. And I ran track and started getting a little notoriety playing football. That was my primary sport. And my high school coach had played for the San Diego Chargers at one time. His name was Tom Black. And he had some friends in some colleges that, he wanted them to take a look at me. And I ended up at Virginia State, but I was looked at by Temple and by Boston College. Temple wasn't going to happen because it was the city, and I was a Suffolk County cat. And I felt that if I went into the city and tried to go to school at the same time, now mind you, I wasn't no A+ student. You know, I did what I had to do. I had fun, but you know, if there was gonna party, I needed to be at the party. I catch up with school later.
Lot of parties in Philly, I imagine.
So I was like, nah, that's probably not gonna work. And in Boston College, it's too cold up in Boston, and Boston back then was very different. But then I got a call to Brigham Young. And that was really different. Mind you, I have a Baptist background. My grandmother's a Baptist preacher. Utah, you know, and I knew they loved to throw the ball. You know, I wanted to go to Nebraska. That was my dream. I was like, put me in Nebraska, Tom Osborne, here I come. You know, I wanted to play running back, you know, but they never came calling. Then Brigham Young calls, and I think McMahon is there. This is like late 80s. And I'm like, flew out there. It was nice, but Utah, 80s, no, we were not ready. I wasn't ready, and I'm sure they weren't ready. And I didn't really realize it until maybe 1990, when you know, there was a gentleman there, running back, who got arrested and kicked off the football squad because he'd had a baby out of wedlock. And he was a black kid, and his girlfriend was white. And I was like, what? It was like a state law. And
Utah's different, man.
Different.
All right, hey, so Cherud, let's back up a little bit. Sounds like you played running back.
Yeah.
All right, so give me your numbers here. How tall were you as a high schooler?
5'7", 5'8". Yeah, I didn't grow much after that. Yeah, so about 5'8". I was about 165, 170. Got to college about 175. So I was probably about the size of David Meggett back in the day, or actually, Dave. And actually, now I can't think of his name. And the thing about it is, I played on the same squad with him. On the practice squad for 6 years. I was at the Buffalo Bills on their practice squad in 85, 86. Didn't get drafted or anything. So yeah, I was fast. I was very fast. I could take a hit. I played running back, and I also played at that time in high school they called it a wing back, college slot back. I would say in the pros, it was more of a scat back. I could catch out of the backfield. I wasn't an every down back then. But that was when, you know, they had the David Meggetts and a couple of the other smaller receivers. They you know, were kind of terrorizing the NFL for a minute. So I did that for, I'll say, a summer, because I couldn't get really picked up by anybody. And I needed to make a decision on, you know, whether I was going to work. Plus, I was already enrolled in what they called a late enrollment with the Navy. At those times, you could have a delayed enrollment. And so I went to college, and I did all the good stuff. And then I got a call from the Navy that I needed to come in to the Navy early. There was, I think it was the Grenada incident, and some other incidences that were going on across the world. And I got called up into the Navy, and I spent, 11 years in the Navy, which I loved. But I did not ever intend to make it a career. It was not. It was a secondary, as my grandmother would say. She said you always needed to have something to fall back on.
So
if somebody had a question. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
yes,
I was just going to ask, how does that work? So did you sign up for the Navy while you were in college, and then they said, "Hey, we need you now"?
Well, yeah, it was what they called delayed entry. So I had gotten a scholarship, but I had also went down to the recruiter and had signed in as a delayed entry. I think what happened was I was mad because I kind of remember the night. I was mad at something, and I was like, you know what? If this doesn't work out, I'll just do 4 years in the Navy. At that time they were saying, you go into the military, you become an officer, everybody will want you. And I was going to school for physics, mind you, because I always wanted to work in science. But as I, matriculated through college, I realized, my guidance counselor didn't guide me correctly. He didn't tell me that in addition to 4 years, I was going to need an additional 2 to 3 years. And you're talking to a kid that was like, okay, we get 4 years out of me. You're talking about 2 additional years, and then I might not be guaranteed a job. I'm trying to play football. I'm trying to do a couple of different things here, and I had some things in the pot. And at the end of the day, Uncle Sam wins. I mean, he gets what he wants. So,
Cherud, you signed a piece of paper just like I did that said if they wanted to, they could call us back now. I wouldn't do that. I'm not in great shape right now, but they technically or legally could. Be a bad idea.
Well, yeah. No, but they do. I often tell folks what Navy really stands for is never again volunteer yourself.
You learn that about month 2 or month 3, right?
So I enjoyed my time there. I can't talk much about what I did for them, but Uncle Sam, he spent a lot of money on me, provided me with a set of tools that very few people have in the civilian life, and I'm glad for it. But it kind of prepared me for the next phase, in business or just in life. The can do kind of attitude that I have, where I don't believe anything is impossible, and when people say that, I'm like, well, no. I mean, everything is possible. And you have to look at it relatively. They said we couldn't fly. We're flying. They said we couldn't get to the moon. We got there. And people often say, well, the other cliche is nobody's perfect. And these are kind of principles that I live for and live by. And I say, well, that's not accurate. Everybody has achieved a level of perfection relative to themselves. Because we're here, at least I'm here, because I have been perfect on a number of occasions. Otherwise, we're not having this conversation. I've been to Somalia. I've been to some other places that the word perfection that was the term of the day. Otherwise, we didn't come back. So I live by a lot of those principles.
All right, Cherud, we're going to explore the Navy more here in a bit, but I want to go back to how did you end up at Virginia State? Did they find you?
I had a friend here at Virginia State who was already playing, and him and I had played together in high school. He was a high school star also up here, and he said, "No, send your tape down." And I sent it down, and the coach was like, I think we're going to need to have you come down and at least try out. And I came down, I tried out. They offered me a scholarship, right then and there. And I had never been to Virginia State is a historically Black school. So I'm coming from up north. I don't know anything about any of this. But I came down here, and my family's from Virginia. My grandmother's from Newport News. I still have cousins there, and we're from the South. We're from like Clinton, North Carolina, is where the majority of the family is. So I went down here, and I had a ball. It was a new experience, and I felt like I was a star on campus. I tell folks, if you get a chance to play any kind of athletic sports in college, man, you got to play it because you only a god once. If you go to the pros, all we see here is the result. You don't see all the business and the BS that goes on behind the scenes. And very few of those are gods, that can name that tune. But if in college, man,
So you were the man. You were the man of Virginia State. I have to ask: did you get timed in the 100 or the 40?
Yeah, I was more of a 200 man. In the 40, at that time I had run probably a 4.49, 4.5. I was like a 4.5 kind of guy. But I did get timed at like 4.49, which is really 4.5. So I was really fast, and I think I was in the 100. I want to say maybe like a 10.7, but the 200, which is my race, I was 21.5, 21.6. That was my race. And a few times, I watched the Olympics. I was like, damn, if I would have ran the Olympics, I might have been able to at least been on the Olympic squad. But it's all about opportunity and when it happens and consistency. But I was a 200 meter man. For some reason, my start was great. Around 100, form wasn't as good, and then I could recover because I was pretty strong in the 200. So,
yeah, your top speed, if you could maintain it, you would. Yeah, it's a weird thing, right? You have a great start, you have a great finish, but the middle's kind of wonky.
Yeah, I never could get the form right to do it, but I had strength, which propelled me, and I had enough speed for the 200. I didn't like the 400 at all. That's a man's race. I kudos to anybody. Back then we used to stride it out. Now it's a full 400-meter sprint, and I have no lungs left after that. They can keep that. So,
Cherud, who was your quarterback? Who was your quarterback at Virginia State?
I want to say it's Kyle Henry. Oh, you're taking me back a little. I want to say it was Kyle Henry. Yeah, it's back in the 80s.
Kevin, why do you ask that?
I was just wondering if it was somebody that I remember. I know Union was. Obviously Union's your main.
Oh,
rival.
that was our competition right there. Yeah,
right.
Union
I knew some
State
guys. Yeah,
Norfolk, Hampton. That's CIAA. Yeah, that's heavy stuff back then.
Absolutely. Yes, it was.
Yeah, a lot of local guys. And that was the other thing. I was an outsider. I didn't play high school ball down here on Friday nights. So they were like, this Yankee coming in from up north. They don't even play football year round. Long Island's not a football hotspot. Yeah, we've had some. We had the Tice brothers. I played high school with Boomer Esiason. He played at East Islip when I was at Bayshore. We've had a few, but not to the degree that some of these other states have. So,
yeah, Florida, Texas, and I would say the Tidewater part of Virginia is right up there.
Yeah, and Ohio. Back then, Ohio, the state of Ohio was killing them. Yeah.
All right. So what year in school were you when the Navy said you've got to join now?
I was sophomore, junior. Yeah.
And that seems unreal to me. I don't know why they wouldn't let you finish school.
Well, because I had applied for my what do they call it? The ASFAB. All right, I had to think of the name because I don't even know if they do the ASFAB anymore.
They still do it. They still do it.
I had scored exceptionally high on the ASFAB, and at that time they needed a skill set that I had, and I could still finish college. I think that was the key. I could still, because I was only stationed in Norfolk. So
yeah. So wait a minute. You were traveling back and forth to finish school?
well, Virginia State at that point had a cooperative program because it was an agri college. So if you were in the sciences, there were times when you would be out of state, in the Midwest, if you were studying agriculture, and still being able to use that as some of your continuing studies to complete your BS, because it was a biology school, but it was really in agribiology. I just liked the physics and the biology portion of that. And a lot of what I had done before my junior year. I had taken like an overload my second half of my freshman year, and my sophomore year, I just loaded up. And so I didn't expect anything to happen, but it was like, I think the spring of my junior year. So it wasn't as if I needed a tremendous amount of credits to graduate. So I was able to kind of take what I needed, finish some, classes, and then I would be done. And what happened is I went into the Navy as an enlisted person. I had the option of going in as an officer because I had enough credits to complete a degree. It may not have been specifically in biology, but I had enough to complete the degree, and that was the turning. But I went in as an enlisted person, and I did that for about a year. And my reason behind that was I didn't want to get anybody killed because I had a college degree. I didn't know the first thing about the Navy, and just because I went to school, I'm going to tell the chief warrant officer who's got, at least 5 hash marks, what to do.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, right? You end up taking these kids at age of 21, 22, 23, putting them in charge of people that have been doing it a lot longer than they have. And the smart young officers listen to the senior guys, right? The ones that are trying to make up for some deficiencies from their high school and middle school years, they end up acting like they're the man or the woman, and they end up being put in their place pretty quickly.
Yeah, so I didn't want that. I wanted to earn the respect. I believe respect is earned, not just given because I got a piece of paper that, quite frankly, I don't really think it meant a whole lot in the military. I mean, I don't, it shows completion. I could think of some other things too, but I did that for a year, and then I went to OCS, which was in Pensacola, Officer Candidate School. Now that's real. That's military. That gives you what the 4 years of college can't give you. And when you go from enlisted to OCS, there's a different level of respect, even from warrant officers, from master chiefs, from enlisted personnel, all the way up, because you did it, I guess what they call a hard way. But I was a hard head, and my grandma always said a hard head makes a soft tail. So I ended up that, there was no turning back from that. I think it was my ASFABs were really, off the chart for some particular areas of expertise that they needed at the time, which is why I was able to do it. Plus, when you put together my transcript from college, it wasn't as if I was a junior who would have been in danger of not graduating had I not done my senior year.
So your 1 year as an enlisted sailor, what was your specialty in that year?
I was an ocean systems technician.
For the layman or for the Army guy on this.
So think of a sonar tech on a ship that listens for submarines.
Okay.
I did that on land. That rate never went to sea. And the A school was so difficult that I had a 98.5 average, and I was still number 10 in a class of 15.
But it was land-based?
Yeah. See, we didn't go to bases. We were on top secret facilities.
Okay.
And so I was stationed in Dam Neck, is where my first station was. And then I went out to Centerville Beach, California. It's kind of a base like Camp Perry, which we call the farm.
Yeah, I'm familiar with all these places. Yeah.
Right. Civilian clothes, no uniforms. You come in kind of like this a little.
So you were doing that from the jump.
Yeah.
Wow. And then when you went through OCS, were you doing the same sort of work?
Yeah.
Okay.
ASW with the anti-submarine warfare.
Huh. Now I understand why you can't really talk about it.
Yeah. So,
did you enjoy the work?
Yeah, because I could tell from a line. And it was so funny because I remember when they first told me about it, I was like, you guys are looking at these lines. What's going on with this? And after I finished A school, I could tell you the line, what ship, what sub it was, how fast, what was going on the sub.
Like whether they were listening to music kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, from a line. So the sonar techs, they listen, physically. But we looked at, and we were analysts. We were analyzing that sound that they would hear.
And you enjoyed it?
Yeah, it was, you know why? Because it was a challenge to find them. Because back then, quiet was the whole key, which it still is now. But, I mean, to manage to find one, oh man, and the rest of the world really didn't know what an ocean systems technician was. And when I tell people, I'm like, yeah, we do what, we guard the United States, in various other areas too. You guys don't even know what's out there. And we see it all, and
were you ever afloat, or were you always land-based?
I was always land-based.
That's wild to me.
Yeah, I don't know what the inside of a ship, I mean, I know what it looks like, but that rate didn't go to sea. And something, it was over 50% women.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because it didn't go to sea. And that was well before now everybody goes to sea.
Yeah, back in the day, they were worried about commingling and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So very, very different. In fact, the rate doesn't exist anymore today.
I thought I knew a lot of stuff about the military. I didn't realize we had land-based guys doing what you were doing. That's wild to me. And you did it for 11 years.
Oh, yeah.
And so a lot of guys get to years 9, 10, and 11. They're like, well, I'm halfway there. I might as well do the full 20. What was your rationale?
It was never going to be something. It wasn't something that I aspired to be. Plus, I wanted to be my own person. And in the military, you're kind of not. I mean, I don't have a problem with authority. I have a problem with people who abuse authority.
I have the same problem, Cherud.
So I'm like, yeah, this is probably not going to work in the long haul for me. Um, I also did some, I volunteered while I was in Dam Neck for Buds. So I've done some other things also. And just the weight of everything and kind of thinking about, what I wanted to do with my life. The Navy, it didn't fit. And I'm pretty strong willed when it comes to, what I want my life to be like. And I'll tell anybody, I tell kids now, when you go in, you make sure that you tell them that you score high enough that you can dictate what it is that you want. Because if you cannot, you will spend 4 years in the service, come out and have less than what you had when you went in. And don't believe the hype that every employer is going to be clamoring to get their hands on you. Because, like I said, I was a lieutenant. Okay. I have not had one job who has hired me because I was a lieutenant in the Navy of all. When you talk about officers, I mean, very few are more coveted than a Navy officer. Means nothing.
Yeah, it doesn't. It depends on the employer, but in general, I agree with that sentiment. Yeah, nobody said, "Hey, Paul, thanks for your service in the Army. We'd love to hire you." Nobody's ever said that to me.
Right, but that's what they tell you when you enter.
Recruiters will say all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so I was strong enough, and I had enough going for me. The military wasn't. It wasn't because the judge said you need to go into the military.
That's one way you get in.
So Cherud,
yeah.
I had some technical difficulties, so I might have missed this. But were the SEALs ever a thought? I know you mentioned earlier that there's some things that you did that you can't talk about. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? I mean, this a little.
Just a tiny bit. So back then it was JSOC. Now it's a bunch of other things. But yeah, I did volunteer in Dam Neck for the Buds. I did pass the qualifications. I ended up going to Coronado, part of a delivery team. And, that was part of the extra weight after, 11 years. It's very different now. We had to carry both our MOSs, which mine was an ocean systems technician, and the additional workload. You don't have to do that now. You can actually go into, I think, any of the military and go directly in. I'll just speak for the Navy. I know that they changed it. You can go directly into Buds. You don't have to it's a separate rate, where before it was not a rate.
It was like a specialty, effectively.
Yeah, it was a specialty, right? And you still had to matriculate in your original MOS. You didn't give that up. So it was tough, and I think that's probably some of the drivers as to why it was changed to where you could just focus on that. Because think about it, you're an operator this couple of months, but you have an MOS that you still need to maintain, and depending upon what the MOS, sometimes it was very difficult. There were some MOSs that really didn't afford you the latitude to jump into any of the specialty, areas. the teams just being, one of them. So therefore you might have to change your rate. So if you changed your rate to like a boatsman or just a seaman, suppose you fell out of buds, which that's a reality, not a possibility. It's a reality. Then what? You've given up your MOS to try out for something that if you make it, it's great. But if you don't, which is the reality is you might not, then you fall back to earth with nothing and have to start all over again. And think about the mental anguish that you've carried just because for the lack of a better word, you failed. I'll be honest with you, you don't fail.
Right, but you feel that
just
way.
Can't do it. I don't use the word fail. Because to be selected, to go through hell, if you made it 2 months, you've never done that much work in your entire life.
Okay, that makes sense.
So fail, I really don't look at it that way. So, and it was just, it was very different back then, in a lot of ways. So that's about as far as I can go with that. But all of that kind of shaped me.
Yeah. So you were mentioning when you were in elementary school, on Long Island, you were the only black kid in that school. Buds probably felt similar.
Oh, without a doubt. And again, that this whole thing was kind of a setup for me my whole life. Being able to overcome, I wouldn't say the odds, but the environment. That's what I call it. The environment, being able to adapt to the environment, knowing my lane, but also just being, confident in my ability to get anything done. Now, I was a knucklehead. If you said jump, if you said, let's get it, we was going to get it in. I didn't take tea for the fever. That was kind of, but I also knew when to kind of use my head. There was a few times in the Navy where I probably should have used my head instead of my tempo. So some of those also, led me to like, what, this might not end well. Let me get out while the getting is good, because that's just, it's not going to be me for long. So
you have fun. It sounds like mostly fond memories of the Navy, but not perfectly, not a perfect experience.
Not a perfect experience, but something, I think it shaped me. It prepared me for the real world. Many of those experiences, I take with me the lessons from those experiences into banking. So I'm in the Navy. I'm stationed in California. I'm about to get out. I need a job. I worked in television for a second. I did advertising sales, because what was I going to do in Eureka, California? I don't know if you know where that's at, but maybe 100 miles, 200 from the Oregon border. It's Northern California. It's God's country, man.
Not a lot up there north of San Fran, right?
Yeah, Humboldt County, where they grow the Humboldt gold. That's where I was.
There have been lots of documentaries on Humboldt
County. Yeah, so not a lot to do up there. Not a lot of money to be made. So I did that till I got out, and I stayed. Because what happened was I was then assigned to shore duty. So I had days off, and I think because I had some days off during the week because of my hours, I was able to do more of a sales type of position where I could sell ad space. It wasn't a 9-to-5 where I was punching the clock and all of that. And, it afforded me some money and kind of get my mind right to what I wanted to do, that I want to see if I could use my biology degree, which was losing its lackluster. I mean, I did use my physics and biology in the military. That was a great thing. Um, and then I got out. Stayed in California maybe 2 or 3 years after that. And then I came back home, and then a friend of mine had asked me would I mind working for a government agency. Well, no, a company that supported government agencies in answering requests for quotes and requests for RFPs and RFQs for the defense industry for mil-spec hardware. And for those of us that are not familiar, mil-spec hardware is any hardware that's used in the military, screws, bolts, anything. So that all has regulations tied behind it. And I worked for a company that lobbied in DC and would get all of that information and then provide it to defense contractors, Grumman, Sikorsky, all of the big boys, and some of the smaller mom and pops, and give them an opportunity to bid on those. So I worked that for a while, and I learned that hardware. And then my same friend, he said, listen, HUD has an opportunity if you're interested in learning, housing regulations. And I was like, housing regulations? I figured, well, you know what? I can read. I've learned defense regulations on little mil-spec hardware. The hell, let me take a shot. And that is how I ended up in banking. I worked for the department, HUD, on a temporary seasonal examination, which turned into a position at the Dime Savings Bank of New York. And that's kind of where the compliance was launched for me, where I was able to really utilize, I would say, all of the skills that I've ever learned, paying attention to detail, to reading and applying, to adapting, to if you fail fast. Just many of those things, when I think about how I folded my skivvies every day in the military, in my undershirts, which I still fold the same way today. There's a method, and it works. And I became really good at it. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed probably the science. Probably more than I did the science. But I ended up tutoring also on the side. So I was still able to give back, with my physics degree, back to the community. So I would tutor high school kids in science and things of that nature when I had the time. But kind of all of that is what kind of launched me, into compliance. And so we fast forward a couple of years, about 25 years, and I catch, 2020 comes around.
Hold on. Before we go to 2020, Cherud, you said you're on the Bills practice squad.
Right.
When was that? Because I'm having trouble figuring out when you fit that in.
So there was a period before when I got out, before the delayed entry actually was executed. So the delayed entry, the way that it worked then, once you were called up, you had a year to actually get all of your personal things together, so to speak. And at that time, so I did that, but I said, you know what, let me try out, just because, was it Napoleon Bonaparte? There was somebody who got an exemption.
Yeah, it was Napoleon Bonaparte.
It was him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And you could also get an exemption if you were going to play sports in the military. A lot of folks don't know that. I mean, this is not the academy. Like the military, the Army, the Marines, they all have like sports that are not part of the academy, that if you qualify for like any of those teams, there's some exemptions that you can get. So I figured, you know what? Let me see if I could get one. And I loved football. I didn't want to give up on it. I mean, I couldn't help that, they called me, but they gave me a year to get my belongings together. So I tried out. And lo and behold, the practice squad. But nevertheless, I was a practice dummy. And I think had I been able to land on a team, I would have still had to serve. No, this is not okay. You don't have to do your time. I had signed a contract, as you said.
Right.
It would have just been delayed, maybe another 2 or 3 years. I think that's kind of the way that it works. You still have to give your service at that time. So I was able to kind of do that. And it gave me kind of time to think about what it was that I really wanted. And since I wasn't going to, it wasn't going to happen. I wasn't going to Canada to play ball. I mean, a lot of folks did that too. I mean,
Yeah.
And that probably would have been the place for me to go because they threw the ball up there. But I wasn't trying. Cold, it was of no interest to me at all. Canada, Calgary, I don't care whether they play in the dome or not. Just wasn't really, feeling that. And you have to make decisions. And people don't really realize, athletes, today's athletes not like the athlete that I grew up with. There wasn't no millions being thrown at you. We didn't have ESPN and TikTok to show everything. It was opportunity and timing. Like the year that I went there, they weren't drafting any small running backs. The next year, David Meggett comes out of Townsend, and the Giants pick him up, and he's God's gift to the world. And I'm like, how the hell does this happen? Timing and opportunity. Wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah. Life's funny that way. All right, let's go to 2020.
So then 2020 happens. And I saw that COVID was rampant, and I had thought to myself, this could be it, this could be the end of the world. Folks are playing around, but my science background, I have my spidey senses thinking like, this is not an ordinary virus. So I went to a conference in Boston for the company, and it was, I would say, the end of February, the beginning of March. But I had also went to New York early, 1st of March also, where, I think COVID was there. But I went to a conference and I came back, and I was on a call when I got back at the job. And I remember, taking control of the call and letting everybody know that, we were going to need to have another call, but we were going to need to postpone it a week, which is something that I normally never do because I said I just wasn't feeling good. So that was the last time I spoke to my colleagues for like probably a year. I had no clue. So I went home, and my wife and I, we had just moved here. We had, I had my daughter, 4 or 5 years old at the time. We have no family here. And I had gotten the temperature. Now, I'm not one to get sick. And usually when I get sick, I can beat it. But I had 105 fever for like 4 to 5 days. My wife couldn't break it. I was going through pajamas. We were doing the cold showers, everything. I couldn't break it. The Tylenol wasn't working. I went to my doctor, and she said, I don't care what they say, you have it. But I didn't have any of, at that time, those symptoms, which was the shortness of breath. That was like key symptom So she called Bond Secure Hospital, and she said, "No, you guys are going to need to take him. He has it." And they were like, they did a chest X-ray, which came back inconclusive. So they sent me back home. And I remember my wife saying, "I'm going to go to the store and I'm going to get some more medicine for you, to see if she can break this temperature." And when she came back, I told her, I said, "I have a cough now. And it's because of the cough I can't catch my breath. Not that I'm having trouble catching it at all, but the cough was just, it was chronic. I just couldn't stop." And I said, "I think I need to go back to the hospital." And she said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yeah, I don't want to play the mano a mano like I normally do." Uh, and so, I told her, I said, "Listen, these are all the bills. This is my life insurance policy." I never really thought for a second that I wasn't coming back. Some just told me that because she was the only one here, and we had no family, so nobody would know anything. Um, so she took me to the hospital. I'm trying to think, was my daughter with me that night? Because we had no babysitter, and COVID was full blast at that point, so nobody was talking to anybody. So there wasn't. Yeah, my daughter had to be in the car with me. And I remember my wife taking me to Bond Secure, and I remember I think it was a cold, rainy night. And I'm getting out of the car, and she looks at me because she couldn't get out the car to go to the tent, because at that point they had tents outside of Bond Secure. And she looked at me and said, "You better not." And that was the last words I heard from her for for 21 days.
Mm. Mm.
They brought me in. They took my oxygen and said that it was really low. And then they brought me into the hospital, and they told me if they can't get my O2 back up, they were going to have to intubate me. And I said, "Intubate me? But does that mean that? That means, I'm going to be, I was like, what?" That was the last thing I remembered. So my wife.
So they intubate you when they're performing surgery and they need you to be perfectly still. That's one time that they intubate you. But this is what, mid to late March?
March 20. About March 17th.
Yeah, so right when the world realized we've got a massive problem, there were governments saying we have a massive issue.
Right.
We were at the very, very beginning for the U.S.
Yeah.
And they were intubating and putting ventilators in everybody, and most of those people didn't make it.
Right. So they're telling me that. I'm like, so that was the last thing I remember them telling me. And then when I spoke to my wife, she said, "Yeah, because within 45 minutes of me dropping you off, they called me and told me that that's where they were going to do." They didn't ask me. They told me that if they didn't do it, you weren't going to make it. So they intubated me, and I didn't know until after I woke up. The doctor said, "You were very difficult to intubate. Your body rejected everything we were doing to try to put you in this coma. We needed to put you in a coma, but your body fought." And I explained to him, I said, "Well, that's probably as a result of my CT training in the military." I mean, you just never forget that, and the body just reacts. So they said they really had to use a lot of drugs to get me in that coma. And you remember, they were learning. They didn't know a whole lot of anything. And they said, they got me under, but the temperature, I still had a temperature. They could not break this temperature. And so for a couple of days, they were trying to put a breathing tube, put a feeding tube. And then they said, I aspirated. They had turned me over to the prone position because that was kind of the new position that they were hearing about. And they said when they did that, my breathing tube fell out. And they said, normally that's a 6-second and it's over. She said, yours was out for a minute. We couldn't get it back in. And once we got it back in, that's when you aspirated. And we were like, we had just finished getting all the fluid off of your lungs. And then you threw up again inside. But luckily, a lot of fluid didn't enter your lung cavity. But what did happen is, because I was on the ventilator, my kidneys shut down. And then my pancreas began to, I guess, be challenged, because let's be real, the ventilator is just for breathing. It doesn't really support the other bodily functions. So things were beginning to break down. And my wife told me, they called her every day to give her an update. And some days there were no updates. And now, mind you, my wife was working, taking care of a 5-year-old with no help in a neighborhood that we just didn't know anybody. She still to this day doesn't know how she was able to do that. It was like a blur. But for a minute there, she says, after day 4, we were worried. But she said after day 7, your doctor was worried because nobody had survived the ventilator here in Richmond after 3 days. And here we are 7 days. And I'm still fighting. I'm trying not to get emotional because it was all I could think of while I was under. I just had so many. I thought I was in Zimbabwe. I thought I saw the monkeys. I thought I was in the middle of war. I was like, my cousin's is a commander in the army. Somebody get her here. My son, was in the army. Get him here. These drugs was no joke. But I fought through, and on day 14, I woke up. And I woke up to the doctor or the nurse holding my hand, saying, do I know where I was? And I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what year it was. I didn't know who the president was. I had no idea what I had just went through. I just remembered when I woke up and I opened my eyes and I moved them from side to side. I saw these machines. I saw all these tubes. I'm like, I think every hole that I had a tube in it. I felt like a fish. I was like, y'all got me like a fish. I got gills now too. I had these 2 things hanging out of my neck that I had no clue of what they were. And then the man walked in the room with this machine, and I looked at him. I said, what are you doing here? He's like, I'm giving you dialysis. I said, dialysis? I've never been on dialysis. And my whole world just went before me. I'm like, wait a minute. I just bought this brand new house. I got a wife. I got a 5-year-old. And you're telling me that I'm going to be on dialysis? And I had watched it deteriorate my father, so I knew, what it was. And at that point, I was like, whoa. I said, somebody call my doctor. I have my own doctor. I have my own nephrologist. I have specialists that I deal with. Somebody needs to tell me something. And they said, no. They said, Mr. Wilkerson, you were very sick. Like your kidneys, it attacked your kidneys. It shut them down. And there wasn't nothing we could do. We just were waiting, but your heart was strong and we could feel you fighting, but there wasn't anything we could do. And when you opened up your eyes, it was miraculous to them. They said they called in the doctors. And I think after day 2, when I was I came off the ventilator. They weaned me off the ventilator like in 3 or 4 days. Because of what, I came to and I still was on the ventilator. But they weaned me off and then monitored me for another 2 days. And when all my signs, vitals were good, they had nicknamed me the One. Because up until then, no one had survived. And here I am, 14 days. I wake up and I'm surviving. Not out of the woods, because mind you, I woke up, I still had COVID. You know?
Wow.
Well, Cherud, I mean, they learned, I guess, fairly quickly after that. I guess as you got into April and May, that the ventilators were not the way to go. And yeah, I mean, the doctors were certainly not trying to do any harm, but the ventilators heavily contributed to a lot of people not surviving. I imagine before you got COVID, you were in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I was. I mean, I couldn't run, the 400, but I could. I was doing 100 push-ups a day. I think I won the push-up challenge twice at Citizens.
You
Remember
did.
that? Yes. And
Of
mind
course I
you,
remember.
right. I'll be 60 in September. Most people were like, "What?" I'm like, I won that contest at like 55.
Mm-hmm.
So I was still in really good shape for my age. I think that really contributed a lot to the ability for me to recover. I think the mental fortitude that I gained in the military also played a large part of that. I think that my religious fundamental background, my belief in God, all of those played an enormous part in my recovery, because even when I recovered and I was still in the hospital, I still had the COVID. They were talking about putting me in a home, a nursing home. And I'm like, oh, I'm surely going to die if I go there. I'm like, no, that's for somebody who can't. That was just not going to be me. But when they told me I had to walk, I got out of the bed thinking I could walk. And to my surprise, I couldn't. I was like, oh, atrophy had really set in. 21 days under, I lost 30 pounds. But I was like, no, you're not sending me to one of these homes where I know they got COVID still running around. You're going to die. So after they told me that, I needed this walker, every night when they left in between their rounds, I would work out. So the floor had black and white cubes, regular hospital floor. I would use my martial art katas and I would work out every night. First, it was just getting to the end of the bed. Then it was getting to the other corner of the bed. Then it was getting all the way to the other side of the bed. Then it was getting from the bed to the bathroom and back. And I would do this every night. And I did it every night for a week. They came back in with their physical therapist because they said, you couldn't walk and we wanted to give you some time. Physical therapist came in after 5 days, after seeing me the first day, and asked me, was I ready for my physical therapy? And I said to her, are you ready for your physical therapy? And she laughed. She said, okay, let's go. So I got out of bed slowly and I stood up and she looked at me. And then I began to walk. And I remember when I first started to walk, I thought of the Christmas song, put one foot in front of the other, those type of things. And she was astonished. She was like, I can't believe this. 5 days ago, you needed the walker just to stand up, to walk to the end of the bed. So then she says, here's a glove. I'm going to throw it on the floor. I want you to go and pick it up. I bent down on one knee, picked it up, stood back up. She immediately called the doctors, not one doctor, but two doctors, to come into the room to examine what she just saw and to get my vitals, because they said it's one thing to survive the ventilator for as long as you did. It's another thing for you to recover in 5 days after being prone for 14. So I went back to bed, and every night, every day, different nurses would just pop in and they'd say, we just want to see who the one was. Because for them, it was a victory. They were so tired of losing patients that seeing me survive, and not just survive, but thrive, gave them hope. And I still didn't really understand the magnitude of what was going on because my wife had taken my cell phone. They had, in the hospital, they got the television. Man, I told them, y'all got to turn this television off because this television has this relaxation channel that says, close your eyes and think that you're in a field of dreams. And what, y'all trying to kill me? I ain't trying to go to heck.
That's not helping you. Yeah. Hey, so how do you feel now? Do you feel like you've completely recovered?
Oh, yeah. If to see me, you would never even have thought that I ever had it. I was riding my bike. See, that was March. I was riding my bike by June. I came home April. I have an upstairs and downstairs. I stayed downstairs first, and they would come over, nurses, take my blood. I still had COVID. I was home, and now we're 30 days into this, and I still got COVID. You would have thought that but because I had it so bad, it just wouldn't leave. But it didn't affect me. I didn't have the shortness of breath. I did what they told me to do with the breathing exercises. I used my steps as workout tools. And when I realized that I could make it to the bathroom, from the living room couch to the refrigerator and back before my wife came back downstairs, I knew I was back in action.
That's awesome.
And it was just a miraculous recovery. The hospital called me. I've done 2 interviews. I did one on News. I think it was News 12. I've been featured in the Richmond magazine 3 times. I'm on the Bond Secure website on their blog for just giving folks inspiration through the COVID. I remember when I left the hospital, while I was in, they gave me this little bear. And what they did is they allowed my wife and my daughter to record their voices and tell me they love me. And I remember squeezing that bear many nights just to hear their voice, because they couldn't see me, they couldn't talk to me until I had maybe 6 days out of the intensive care. But the nurses were just unbelievable. And the day that I left, the entire intensive care wing lined the hall.
Oh, that's cool.
And as they rolled me out, you could see them crying. And as I got to the end, I turned around and I stood up in my wheelchair. And I gave them one of those Independence Day speeches. I told them, I have been to war. I said, and you guys are the new front line. We're not fighting with tanks, airplanes, any of that. You are the new front line. You're going to fail, but you're going to fail fast. You learn quickly, adapt. You can beat this, but it is going to take a discipline, and it's going to take all that you thought you didn't have to win this. And it was a standing ovation. And they wheeled me out. My wife came and got me and took me home. And then, they called me back, 4 months later. The doctors, all of the ones who actually took care of me, met me at the hospital. And we did a newscast from the hospital. And that's when I learned, a lot of the stuff I didn't know that I was telling you about my kidneys and everything. And then one of the nurses who spoke to my wife every day, she said, "There's one thing that you didn't know you said. But one day when you had woken up and you had realized you had gotten it all back, you screamed out, 'Your boy is back.'" And we all wanted to get a shirt made. So it was a feel-good story. And when I tell you, when I got back home and I looked on Facebook, there were so many posts about me from people that I didn't even know, who, when they heard my wife had mentioned, had put it out there that I had woken up, the hope, because that's the one thing I think was fading fast. When you have over 1,000 people a day dying, hope is lost. And in our community, we were decimated. And for me to survive, it gave them hope. And that's what they needed. And I often say, me going through this wasn't for me necessarily, but it was for those of us who were going through it and were losing so many people that they had lost hope. And I was one in 1,000 stories like this that was able to make it through and be that beacon, of hope. But when I looked at Facebook, I tell you something, it was eerie because I lived my funeral.
Yeah.
When I look at all the comments, you never see this because you die.
Right.
Right.
Hey, I can tell you, your story, and I was lucky enough because I worked with you to actually hear about it, was able to follow it, went from potential tragedy to enormous positive hope, just like you just said, because in the beginning, none of us knew what was going on. Everybody's scrambling around. They're sending everybody home. No one wants to go out their house. People are dying, like you said, thousands per day. And then someone that goes through what you went through and then came out on the other side. Amazing. Now, so that leads me to a question, actually. So how has your perspective on life either changed or how has it? I mean, how do you look? Because I can only imagine you're walking on cloud 9 pretty much every day at this point.
So it's something as simple as this. We get up at night and we go to the bathroom. When I get up and go to the bathroom at night, I say, "Thank you, God." And I don't say it just to say it.
Right.
Because there was a time when I couldn't do it. It's that simple, because it's that quick that you might not be here. I roll over, I look at my daughter might do something, and my wife will tell me, "You still need to talk to somebody," because I'll just start crying. I said, because this almost wasn't reality. I mean, I just took her to the father-daughter dance in February. And in March, she almost lost me. And so now everything is different. I went out, bought a Range Rover, bought a boat. I'm not waiting.
I love it.
I'm like,
That's awesome.
I'm not waiting till I retire, because if anything this has taught me, we always say tomorrow is not promised. We love to say that word. Listen,
mean
you
it.
don't.
You mean it.
Right. You don't know it until for real. And you better hope to God that you can make it to tomorrow, because a lot of folks wanted to and didn't. So my perspective has
Absolutely.
it's different. My family life, I never took it for granted, but I definitely don't take it for granted now. This work balance is serious. Citizens was excellent to me. When I tell you they call my wife every week. I mean, Ransom, Rose, everybody was just um, over and above. And Citizens took care of me. They told me I didn't have to come back for a year. I could have stayed. I only stayed till June because I found myself doing my wife's work. And I was like, okay, I need to get back to work. And I mean, I'm working from home. I need to get back to work. My brain was right. So, but yeah, that's the perspective that I live with now. And I really, when I speak to people about it, I want them to really understand just how precious every second is. And don't take your health for granted at all. Because when you don't have it, it's a different ball game. And I was lucky. I was blessed. I was able to get it back. Some folks recovered, but we're left with lingering effects. A lot of people, to where they can't work again. It affects everything. And that wasn't my case. And I just, I really encourage people, take care of yourself. I don't care how old you are, go to the doctor. If you feel something is wrong, challenge the doctor. They don't know it all. You know your body. Write down things. If this, you get a headache and it's not something that you get, write it down, the day, the time, because what happens is it may not happen for another month or so, and you may get to the doctor, and you know how they always ask you, how you feeling? Feeling good. Any symptoms, anything I should know about? We all say the same thing, nothing. But if we write it down, then we can say, this happened. And if it's been your doctor, like my doctor, she saved my life. She is incredible.
What's your doctor's name, Cherud?
Dr. Habib, Alicia Habib, because she had been my doctor for 7 years. So she knew me. And she said, I will call the hospital, the chief administrator, and tell them. She did that. She was like, no. And even when I go to her office now, they smile and they're like, the miracle.
Cherud, that's an incredible story, and I really appreciate you joining us. We got two more things we're going to cover before we end this particular episode. Kevin has a question that he asked towards the end. It's impossible to segue from the story you just told to Kevin's question, but Kevin, go ahead and ask your question.
It is impossible to segue, but let's just say this. Say a late night talk show host heard this story and said, you know what? I want Cherud Wilkerson to do my job tonight. There's my segue. So tonight you are the owner of the talk show, the Tonight Show, whatever show it is. You get to pick a male guest, a female guest, a musical act, and a comedian. And this could be people that are dead or alive, people you've always wanted to meet, people you know. It could be anyone. You could be going for ratings. Hey, I'm going to have the greatest show ever. Or it just could be about you and what you like. But a male guest, female guest, musical group, and comedian.
Okay, so the comedian would probably be Bernie Mac.
Oh, I love Bernie Mac. I wish he was still with us.
Yeah, the comedian would be Bernie Mac. A female host.
This is a guest. This is whoever you want to interview.
I can't think of her name right now, but she played in Terminator. Not she didn't play in Terminator. She played in Aliens 3, and she also played in Love and Basketball. I cannot think of her name right now. Where's my phone?
Kevin's going to the Google machine. Cherud, he'll look it up.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, she's the lead character in Love and Basketball.
What about music group?
Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Earth, Wind, and Fire is generational, man. I was talking to some folks in my family I see once or twice a year, and Earth, Wind, and Fire came on, and they knew exactly who it was, and they were like 15, 16 years old. It was awesome.
Yeah. So who else? Who am I missing?
Male and female, but Kevin's looking up.
He's
female.
looking up the female.
Yeah.
Male.
Shanae Lathan?
Sanaa. Yeah.
How do you say her name? Shanae?
Sanaa Lathan.
Shanae Lathan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shanae. Alien versus Predator. Yep. Brown Sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was in some good movies. Best Man.
Yeah. Yeah. Male.
That's a good.
It would probably be Barack Obama.
All right on.
What's the first thing you'd ask?
No, you got it.
What's the first thing you'd ask Rock? I'd love to know.
Ask Barack?
Yeah, what's the first
thing
you'd
I'd ask Barack?
Yeah.
How did he sleep the first day he was out of office?
Like
the assumption is he slept really well, right?
Yeah, I would hope so, but you just don't turn that on and off.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Probably couldn't let that go for a little while.
All right,
right.
Cherud, that's a great lineup. I would definitely check out your talk show for that night. Last topic, tell us about your family.
So my family, it's my second, I've been married twice. I have a 38-year-old son. I have a 36-year-old son. I have a 16-year-old son. And I have a 7-year-old daughter.
She was brought into your life because it sounds like you had too much testosterone for a while.
Well, yeah. My wife is 15 years younger than me. So, and I have grandkids that are older than my daughter.
All right. Well, hey, give us your sons and your daughter's names and your wife's name.
My oldest son is my namesake, Cherud Jr. My middle son is Chris. My youngest son is Jelani. My only daughter is Natalie. And my wife's name is Natasha.
Right on. All right. So last question. How'd you meet Natasha?
So she always got something to say about this. But so I was at a bar one night and I was talking to the bartender who I thought was really cute. And I saw this young lady walk in and I said, whoa, who is that? But no one knew. And so she had turned around and she had walked out. And I was going through my divorce at the time. So I really hadn't been out, kind of still a little skittish, like, So one of my best friends says, we're going out Thanksgiving, the day before Thanksgiving, big party. We're going to go out. So I said, she said, come on. So we go out to this club on Long Island, and I'm sitting at the bar, and I look across, and I said, oh, my goodness, that's the girl that I saw at the other bar. So I kept looking at her, trying to get her attention, and I'm drinking. I'm getting my courage up, get my liquid courage, So I walk around to the other side of the bar, and I asked her, I said, yeah, can I have your name? And she was like, well, I don't want to dance. And I'm saying, well, I don't want to ask you that. I just really want to know your name. I don't know if she told it to me then. Maybe she did. But then I went back around and I sat down and there was another guy checking her out. And I think he sent her a drink over. And by the middle of the night, we had met again on the dance floor. We were dancing, and we kept dancing like all night. And at the end of the night, she'll tell you, she says, I was waiting for him to ask me for the number, but I didn't know whether she liked me. I had seen her upstairs with another dude. I didn't know, I liked her. So she gave me her number, and we just became really good friends. From that, we hung out like all the time. I remember her asking me, she's like, when are you going to kiss me? I'm like, well, I mean, we're hanging out, but that doesn't mean, you like me. Again, I'm going through a divorce,
Not the most confident time in your life, I imagine.
Yeah. I'm not trying to misread somebody, and the rest, it's history. We both had a house less than 3 miles from each other. We didn't know it. And we moved to, Harlem, and we moved to the Bronx. I took a job here. And before that, I asked her to marry me. So we got married in Turks and Caicos.
Nice.
Beautiful spot to get married. Holy cow. Yeah.
Yeah. So here we are.
Well, Cherud, I really appreciate you joining us and telling us your story, man. What an incredible story. I'm so glad you're still with us, man.
Me too.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure a lot of folks are glad that I'm here. And as long as I'm here, I'm going to spread some wisdom wherever I can go. And, the center of the universe is the center of the universe. Ashland is the center of the universe, right?
That's where I am right now, but it's meant to be an Ashland thing. It's also meant to be we're focused on you, and that becomes the center of the universe.
Okay. I like that. Okay.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also really appreciate if you'd rate and review us. You can find us at scodupodcast.com.